The air in the Hindu Kush was so cold it felt brittle, like spun glass, ready to shatter in your lungs. The wind howled through the passes, a mournful, constant shriek that gnawed at your resolve. For Lieutenant Anya Sharma, an intelligence officer embedded with a special operations team, the cold was the least of her problems. The real chill came from the men around her, and the unspoken label they had given her: a liability. Sergeant Major Kane, a mountain of a man with a beard caked in frost and eyes that had seen too much, was the chief purveyor of this sentiment. He was the team leader, a blunt instrument of war, who believed in brute force, kinetic action, and the kind of tactical precision that came from years of kicking down doors. He had no time for what he called paper pushers or pencilnecks. "We're here to do a job, Lieutenant," he'd said on the transport plane. His voice was a low growl, meant to be intimidating. "Our job is to go in, grab the asset, and get out. Your job is to stay out of the way and not get us killed." Anya knew the drill. On paper, her role was invaluable. She was a master of signals intelligence and human intelligence. She could piece together a mission profile from the faintest digital whispers, identify key targets from 1,000 faces, and understand the intricate cultural and political tapestries of their target area better than anyone. But in the field, in the unforgiving terrain of a hostile land, all that felt meaningless. Her M4 carbine felt foreign in her hands. Her combat vest felt like a bulky suit of armor she was unprepared to use. The team saw her as a walking weakness, a non-combatant they were forced to babysit. Their current mission, Operation Spectre, was to retrieve a high-value Pakistani intelligence asset who had gone dark near the Afghan border. He had been a goldmine of information, and his silence was a 5-alarm fire. His last known location was a remote mountain compound, and the intel suggested he was being held by a small but well-trained hostile force. The snow began to fall, fat, wet flakes that quickly turned into a blinding whiteout. Anya pulled her balaclava higher, the cold seeping through the layers of her uniform. The team was moving in a staggered formation, each man a silent ghost in the swirling storm. Kane led the way, his massive frame cutting a path through the thigh-high drifts. They were less than a mile from the compound. The silence was the only thing louder than the wind. Anya's training told her something was off. Her intelligence work was a game of patterns, and this pattern was all wrong. The lack of patrol activity, the strange placement of the snowdrifts, the way the shadows fell against the distant rocks. It all felt deliberate, too perfect. She tried to raise her concerns over the comms, but the blizzard was playing havoc with their signal. Only the static crackle of broken communication responded to her urgent whispers. The team kept moving. They were a machine of muscle and bone, fueled by a single-minded focus on the objective. Konya, however, was a machine of thought. Her mind was racing, analyzing every scrap of information she had. The last signal from the asset, the satellite imagery of the compound, the intel on the local hostiles, it all clicked into a terrifying picture. This wasn't a hideout, it was a trap. Part 2. The silent blizzard, the snow, was no longer just falling. It was a living, swirling wall. Visibility dropped to a few feet, and the world shrank to the dim silhouette of the soldier in front of you. Anya's breath plumed in the freezing air, and her heart hammered a steady rhythm against her ribs. She was the 7th person in a file of 12, a human chain stretching into the abyss of the blizzard. The compound was a dark smudge on the horizon, but her tactical map showed they were within a few hundred yards. They had to be careful. Kane had ordered a cold approach, meaning no comms and no lights. They were relying on their night vision and the instincts forged in 100 firefights. She felt a flicker of anxiety, a prickle of intuition that was more than just the cold. She'd been taught to trust her gut, but her gut had never been in a firefight before. The team, however, was on a different frequency. They were wired for violence, for the visceral act of closing with the enemy. To them, the silence was a gift, a chance for a clean kill. But the silence was the trap. Anya saw it first, a subtle deviation in the pattern of a rock formation. The rocks didn't look natural. They were too uniform, too carefully placed. Then, the glint of metal, a brief flash against the whiteout, a reflection from a sniper scope hidden in a crevice. She tried to shout, to warn them, but the wind snatched the words from her lips. She lunged, pushing the soldier in front of her to the ground. The first shot was a muffled thump as it was absorbed by the snow and the silencer on the rifle. The soldier she had pushed, a young private named Gomez, grunted in surprise. But the round that was meant for him whizzed harmlessly over his head. Then, hell broke loose. The world exploded in a cacophony of sound and fury. The ambush was perfectly executed. They were caught in a kill zone, with hostiles on 3 sides. The snow was a curse, hiding the enemy but exposing the team. Anya saw the flash of an RPG launcher, the chattering muzzle of an AK-47. She saw Kane fall, a dark, heavy mass against the pristine white. A second later, a dull thud, and her comms went dead. The whole team was down, pinned in the open. Anya hit the ground, burrowing into a snowdrift. The world was a blur of sound and violence. She was alone, isolated. She could hear the shouts of the team, the return fire, but it was all muffled, distant. A bullet whizzed past her ear, kicking up a spray of ice crystals. She was no longer a liability. She was a target. Part 3. The Ghost in the Snow. Anya was alive, but barely. She was trapped in a small depression, a half-buried hollow in the snow. Her M4 was still in her hands, but her brain, her training, her entire existence rebelled against the idea of a frontal assault. She was not a warrior. She was a ghost. She took a moment to assess the situation. The comms were out. The team was scattered and pinned down. She couldn't see any of them. The snow was still falling relentlessly, a perfect cover for both her and the enemy. She was in a kill zone, a perfectly planned ambush. Her mind went back to the hours she had spent in the mission planning room, staring at satellite photos and listening to intercepted radio chatter. She knew the enemy's tactics. They were disciplined, precise. They were using a classic flanking maneuver, with a main force to her front and a smaller, but more dangerous force trying to get behind them. She had seen the schematics of the compound, had read the profiles of their commanders. They were arrogant, overconfident. They expected an easy fight against a small, trapped unit. She had to get out of the kill zone. She had to become invisible again. Her body, shivering from the cold and the shock, felt clumsy and slow. But her mind was a supercomputer, processing data at an impossible speed. She remembered a small, rocky outcropping she had noted on the map, 100 yards to her left. It was a natural blind spot, a place the enemy would think was too exposed to be useful. She had to get there. She crawled, not ran. A soldier running in the snow was a moving target. A ghost in the snow was invisible. She moved with a silent, serpentine grace, her movements economical and controlled. She used every small rise in the terrain, every shallow drift, as a shield. The sound of the battle was a distant roar, but she moved through it with a quiet determination. She reached the rocky outcropping, a dark, jagged fortress of stone against the swirling white. She pressed her back against the cold rock, taking a moment to breathe. Her breath came in ragged, painful gasps. She was alive. But for how long? Then, a voice. A hostile voice, speaking Pashto, just a few feet away. A hostile soldier, hidden behind a similar rock, was talking on a radio, reporting their status. He was one of them, the flanking force. He was close enough that Anya could almost reach out and touch him. She could see his silhouette, the dark shape of his weapon, against the snow. He was unaware of her presence. A different kind of training kicked in. Her intelligence work had taught her to be patient, to wait for the perfect moment. Her mind, a weapon more dangerous than any rifle, started to work. She was no longer a liability. She was a ghost. She was a hunter. Part 4. The hunter. Anya's hands, which had spent countless hours at a keyboard, now felt steady as they held her M9 pistol. The weapon, a standard-issue sidearm, felt light and familiar. She drew it from her holster, the movement silent and fluid. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her mind was calm. She had to get this right. She had to get him without alerting the others. She moved around the rock, her body low and close to the ground. The wind howled, a perfect cover. She got behind him, a silent specter in the storm. She didn't shoot. Instead, she used her boot to kick a small rock, sending it skittering across the snow. The sound, sharp and unexpected, made the hostile soldier turn his head. In that split second, Anya was on him. Her hand, gloved and powerful, clamped down on his mouth, silencing his shocked cry. Her other hand, holding the pistol, pressed the cold steel against the back of his neck. Thump. She pulled the trigger. The sound was a soft, muffled whisper, swallowed by the snow. He collapsed, a heavy, silent mass. Anya dragged his body into the shadows of the rocks, a ghost leaving no trace. 1 down, 8 to go. She took his radio. She spoke in fluent Pashto, her voice a perfect imitation of his. Her words calm and assured. All clear. No movement in this sector. They're still pinned down by the front line. No flanking needed. A lie. A perfect lie. The enemy, overconfident and expecting an easy fight, wouldn't question it. It was a psychological trick, a manipulation of their own arrogance. She had just bought herself time. She crept forward, a predator in the snow. She neutralized the next hostile with his own knife, a quick, silent, and brutal attack that shocked her with its cold efficiency. 2 down, 7 to go. She used the terrain against them. She moved silently, using the swirling snow as a veil. She found a third hostile, a spotter on a small ridge, and used a small sharp rock to create a diversion. He turned, and she shot him in the head with her pistol, the muffled sound barely a whisper. 3 down, 6 to go. The battle raged on around her, a constant, furious roar, but in Anya's world, it was silent. She was a specter, a phantom. She found the leader of the flanking force, a tall, imposing man she had seen on her mission profiles. He was giving orders, confident in his position. She shot the man to his left, and then the man to his right. And then she shot him. A clean, silent 3-shot series. The last thing he saw was her face. A mask of grim determination in the swirling snow. 6 down, 3 to go. She moved with an almost supernatural speed, her movements driven by a single purpose. She was no longer just an intelligence officer. She was a force of nature, an embodiment of pure, unadulterated efficiency. She found the last 3 hostiles, a small group trying to flank her pinned-down team, and used a hand grenade from one of the men she had killed. The detonation was a small, muffled thump in the deep snow, but the blast sent their bodies flying. 9 hostiles, neutralized, before backup arrived. Part 5. The aftermath. Anya stood in the snow, her body trembling, her hands shaking. The cold had seeped into her bones, but the adrenaline had kept her going. The fighting had stopped. The silence was deafening, a profound quiet that settled over the battlefield like a shroud. She stood alone in the clearing, the only survivor of the silent war she had just waged. She found her team. They were all still alive, but pinned down. The team leader, Sergeant Major Kane, was severely injured, a bandage wrapped around his leg. He was pale, and his eyes were wide with shock. He had seen the last 2 hostiles fall to a single, silent shot. He had seen the last hostile disappear in a blast of snow. He had no idea what had happened. Backup arrived, a team of rangers from a nearby base, their snowmobiles a roaring chorus in the distance. They found the team, battered and bruised, but alive. They found Anya, a small, dark figure standing over the neutralized hostiles, her pistol still in her hand. The rangers looked at the scene, their faces a mask of confusion. The team was still pinned down, but the enemy was gone. The hostiles were scattered across the battlefield, neutralized with a quiet, efficient brutality. There were no signs of a firefight, no spent casings, no signs of a large-scale assault. Just a silent, deadly aftermath. Kane looked at Anya, his eyes filled with a new, profound respect. The label, Liability, had been burned away by the cold, hard reality of the last hour. She hadn't just survived, she had won. Part 6, The Debriefing. Later that night, in a small, cramped briefing room, the story of Operation Spectre was recounted. The room was filled with the low murmur of tired, relieved men. The mission was a success, but no one could explain what had happened. Kane, his leg propped up on a chair, recounted the ambush, the chaos, the moment they were all pinned down. He got to the part where the comms went out, and he was forced to lie there, helpless. "We were dead in the water," he said, his voice a low rumble. Then, one by one, the hostiles just went down. It was silent. No firefight, just ... gone. He looked at Anya, who was sitting in the corner, a silent specter in the room. Her face was calm, her eyes serene. "It was Lieutenant Sharma," he said, his voice full of a newfound respect. "She was behind enemy lines, a ghost in the snow. She used their own tactics against them. She didn't use brute force. She used her mind. She used ... her intellect. She neutralized 9 hostiles on her own. Before backup arrived, she didn't just save us. She won the whole thing." The room went quiet. The men, who had once seen her as a liability, now saw her as a legend. They no longer saw her as a pencil-necked paper pusher. They saw her as a ghost, a silent, deadly, and brilliant warrior. Anya walked out of the room, the men partying for her, their faces a mixture of awe and respect. The label was gone. She wasn't a liability, she was a legend. And she knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that she would never be just a paper pusher again.